I know what you did in 2008, the blackmail note read. The billionaire had 24 hours to confess before everyone knew. The note trembled in Adrian Dawson's hands, though his hands never trembled. Not when he'd negotiated billion-dollar mergers. Not when he'd stood before shareholders and lied through his perfect teeth. Not even that night in 2008 when everything went to hell. But they were trembling now. I know what you did in 2008. You have 24 hours to confess publicly, or I will tell everyone. The clock started at midnight. Tick-tock, Adrian. The letters were cut from magazines like some twisted ransom note from a crime thriller, pasted onto expensive cardstock that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Whoever sent this had money. And taste for the dramatic. Adrian's penthouse office on the 47th floor of Dawson Tower suddenly felt like a cage. The floor-to-ceiling windows that usually made him feel like a god overlooking his kingdom now felt like exposure. Like someone was watching. Like someone had been watching. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive deeper into Adrian's nightmare, I need to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And listen, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button because stories like this one, where secrets have teeth and the past never stays buried. We're just getting started, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Trust me on this one. The note had been waiting on his desk when he arrived at 6:47 a.m., 17 minutes earlier than usual. His assistant wouldn't arrive for another hour. Security hadn't flagged any breaches. The cleaning crew had been vetted 6 ways from Sunday. The building had cameras on every floor, biometric scanners on every entrance, guards who earned 6 figures to keep people exactly like this, whoever this was, out. And yet, someone had walked right in and left him a ticking time bomb made of paper and glue. Adrian moved to his desk on autopilot, his Italian leather shoes silent on the imported marble floor. Everything in this office screamed success. The Rothko on the wall worth $8 million. The Macallan 1926 in the crystal decanter, one of 40 bottles in existence. The view of the city spreading out below like a circuit board of lights and lives and people who would crucify him if they knew. If they knew. His phone buzzed. A text from his fiancée, Marianne Sheffield, daughter of Senator Sheffield, darling of the social pages, the woman who would complete his perfect, carefully constructed life. Breakfast at the Carlisle at 8? The Times wants a photo spread for the engagement announcement. Wear the navy Tom Ford. I love you. Red heart. The engagement. The wedding planned for spring at her father's estate in the Hamptons. 300 guests. The senator himself would officiate. It would be the social event of the season, cementing Adrian's place not just in the financial elite but in the political aristocracy. 24 hours from now, it would all be ashes. He looked at the note again. The glue was still tacky in one corner. This had been made recently, perhaps even last night. Someone had sat somewhere, probably close by, cutting out letters with scissors or a razor blade. Choosing each word carefully. I know what you did. But what exactly did they know? Because 2008 hadn't been just one thing. It had been a cascade of decisions, each one darker than the last, each one necessary to survive the financial collapse that had destroyed empires. Adrian had been 31 years old, hungry, desperate to prove himself at Lehman Brothers' competitors. He'd made choices. God, the choices he'd made. The question burning through his chest wasn't whether he deserved this. He probably did. The question was, which sin had finally caught up with him? Was it the insider trading that had netted him his first $12 million? The information he'd stolen from a rival firm? The colleague he'd thrown under the bus to save his own career? Or was it the other thing? The thing he'd buried so deep he sometimes convinced himself it had never happened at all. The thing that woke him at 3 a.m. on bad nights, his heart hammering, Marianne's hand soft on his shoulder asking if he was okay, and him lying, always lying, saying it was just work stress. The thing that, if it came out, wouldn't just destroy his reputation. It would put him in prison. Adrian's reflection stared back at him from the black mirror of his computer screen. 47 years old. Silver at his temples that made him look distinguished. Jaw sharp enough to cut glass. Eyes that Forbes had once called the cold blue of ambition itself. Right now, those eyes looked hunted. He pulled out his phone, fingers hovering over the keypad. Who could he call? His lawyer? No, attorney-client privilege only went so far, and Marcus would ask questions Adrian couldn't answer. Private investigator? Too risky. The board? Absolutely not. For the first time in 16 years, since he'd clawed his way up from a middle-class childhood in Queens to this temple of wealth and power, Adrian Dawson was completely, utterly alone. The clock on his wall, a vintage Patek Philippe that had cost more than his father had earned in a lifetime, read 6:51 a.m. 23 hours and 9 minutes until everyone knew. 23 hours and 9 minutes to decide, confess to something that would destroy everything he'd built, or call the blackmailer's bluff and pray that whatever they had wasn't enough to bury him. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. His stomach dropped. He answered without speaking. A voice, digitally distorted, neither male nor female. Did you get my note, Adrian? Who is this? A laugh, processed through whatever app they were using, sounded like wind chimes made of razor blades. Someone who was there. Someone who saw. Someone who's been waiting a very, very long time for you to pay. If this is about money. This isn't about money. The voice cut through his words like a scalpel. This is about justice. This is about truth. You built an empire on lies and bodies, Adrian. It's time the world knew what you really are. I don't know what you think you know, but... Brighton Beach. November 14, 2008. 11:47 p.m. Adrian's heart stopped. That's what I know. And in 23 hours, unless you confess, so will everyone else. Your fiancé. Her father the senator. The SEC. The FBI. Your board. Every newspaper, every website, every person who's ever admired you. They'll all know exactly what you did. The line went dead. Adrian stood frozen, phone pressed to his ear, listening to silence that roared like an ocean. Brighton Beach. November 14, 2008. The night his whole life had changed. The night someone had died. How far would you go to protect a secret? And what happens when the past refuses to stay buried? Drop a comment below with your theory. What do you think Adrian did that night? Adrian made it to the Carlisle at 8:02, which Marianne would consider late. She was already seated at their usual corner table, perfectly composed in a cream Chanel suit, her honey blonde hair swept into the effortless updo that probably took her stylist an hour to achieve. She was scrolling through her phone with one hand, cappuccino in the other, the 3-carat engagement ring he'd given her last month catching the morning light like a small, expensive star. She was beautiful. She was connected. She was everything a man in his position should want. And in 22 hours, she would know exactly what kind of monster she'd agreed to marry. Darling. Marianne looked up, her smile magazine perfect. You look pale. Are you coming down with something? Didn't sleep well. Adrian kissed her cheek, catching the scent of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, because Marianne Sheffield didn't do unexpected. Bad dreams. You work too hard. She squeezed his hand, her touch warm and genuine. That was the worst part. Marianne wasn't some gold digger or social climber. She actually loved him. Or loved who she thought he was. Daddy wants to have dinner Thursday. Something about introducing you to the governor before the fundraiser. The governor. Of course. Because Adrian's carefully constructed future wasn't just about wealth anymore, it was about power. Real power. The kind that came with political connections, with a senator for a father-in-law, with access to the rooms where laws were made and fortunes were legitimized. All of it balanced on a foundation of secrets that someone was about to dynamite into rubble. Thursday's perfect, Adrian lied. Lying to Marianne came easily now, after 6 months together. He'd built their entire relationship on a fiction of who he was. What was one more lie? The Times photographer arrived, all efficient smiles and light meters. Adrian and Marianne posed, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest, both of them performing happiness for a camera that would preserve this moment forever. The last photograph of Adrian Dawson before the fall. Beautiful, the photographer declared. The city's most glamorous couple. If he only knew. By 9:30, Adrian was back at Dawson Tower, riding the private elevator to the 47th floor. His assistant, Vivian Chen, was already at her desk outside his office, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd been with him for 8 years. Vivian knew more about his business than anyone except his lawyer. She was loyal, discreet, and ruthlessly efficient. But even Vivian didn't know about Brighton Beach. Morning, Mr. Dawson. Vivian handed him a tablet with his schedule. The Tokyo calls are confirmed for 11. Harrison wants 15 minutes about the Singapore acquisition. And your mother called, she said you haven't returned her messages in 2 weeks. His mother. Christ. Elena Dawson, retired public school teacher from Queens, the woman who'd raised him in a rent-controlled apartment and taught him that hard work and integrity were worth more than money. She would be devastated. I'll call her, Adrian said, knowing he wouldn't. Vivian, I need you to pull something for me. Security footage from last night. Every entrance, every floor. Especially the executive level. Vivian's eyebrows rose fractionally, her only tell when something was unusual. Is there a problem? Just being cautious. I'll have it within the hour. She paused. Mr. Dawson, are you all right? You seem off. Everyone could see it. The cracks in his armor showing already, and the real pressure hadn't even started. I'm fine, Adrian said. Another lie. Just a long week. In his office, he locked the door and pulled out the note again. The letter stared back at him, accusatory and smug. I know what you did in 2008. Brighton Beach. November 14th. The night that had haunted him for 16 years. He'd been at a bar, some dive near the boardwalk that he'd never been to before and never went to again. The markets were in free fall. Lehman had just collapsed. Bear Stearns was gone. The entire financial system was eating itself alive, and Adrian had been hemorrhaging money he didn't have from positions he couldn't close. He'd been desperate. Drunk. Stupid. And then he'd met him. Adrian closed his eyes, but the memory played anyway, vivid as yesterday. The man at the bar, mid-50s, expensive suit that didn't match the dive bar atmosphere. Russian accent. Cold eyes that had seen things Adrian couldn't imagine. You look like a man with problems, the Russian had said. You look like a man who causes them, Adrian had replied. The Russian had smiled. Maybe I'm a man who solves them. For the right price. What happened next, the conversation, the proposal, the thing Adrian had agreed to in his desperation, that had changed everything. That decision, made in a shitty bar on a cold November night, had been the foundation of every dollar he'd made since. Every success, every triumph, every step up the ladder had been built on what he'd done that night. Not the murder. No, he hadn't killed anyone. But he'd enabled it. Profited from it. Buried it. And someone knew. A knock on his door made Adrian's eyes snap open. Yes? It's Thomas, mate. The voice belonged to Thomas Beckett, his CFO, and closest thing to a friend Adrian had. Got a minute? Adrian unlocked the door. Thomas strode in, all 6'3" of him, former Cambridge rugby player turned financial wizard. They'd met at a conference in Dubai 7 years ago and bonded over single malt and a shared ruthlessness in business. Thomas was the only person at Dawson Capital who occasionally saw past Adrian's defenses. Which made him dangerous right now. You look like hell, Thomas said, his British accent somehow making the observation sound almost polite. "What's going on?" "Nothing." "Why?" "Because I've known you 7 years, and I've never seen you rattled. You're always ice. Right now, you look like you're about to shatter." Thomas sat in one of the leather chairs across from Adrian's desk, genuinely concerned. "Talk to me." Adrian wanted to. God, he wanted to tell someone, to share this crushing weight. But Thomas had a wife, 2 kids, a reputation. Getting him involved would only add another casualty when everything exploded. "Just wedding stress," Adrian said. Thomas laughed. "Wedding stress? You? The man who negotiated hostile takeovers in 3 countries while having the flu?" "Try again." Before Adrian could respond, his phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. "Tick-tock, Adrian. 21 hours left. Hope you're preparing your confession. P.S. Love the photo in the Times. Marianne looks radiant. Shame she'll be so heartbroken soon." The blood drained from Adrian's face. "Adrian?" Thomas leaned forward. "What is it?" "Nothing." Adrian pocketed the phone. "Look, Thomas, I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine." "Really? Just need to work through some things." Thomas studied him for a long moment. "All right. But when you're ready to talk about whatever's actually going on, you know where to find me." He stood, paused at the door. "We all have things in our past, mate. Things we're not proud of. Whatever this is, you don't have to face it alone." When Thomas left, Adrian sat in silence, those words echoing. We all have things in our past. But not like this. Thomas's past probably involved insider tips and tax havens, the standard moral compromises of their world. He didn't have a corpse buried in his foundation. He hadn't made a deal with a Russian criminal that had kick-started his entire fortune. Adrian's computer dinged. Email from Vivian, security footage ready for review. He spent the next hour scanning through camera feeds from the previous night. Cleaning crew at 8 p.m. Security guard rounds at 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Nothing on the executive floor except, there. At 4:17 a.m., a figure in janitorial uniform, head down, pushing a cart. The person moved directly to Adrian's office, was inside for 43 seconds, then left. Adrian zoomed in, but the figure kept their face away from cameras with the precision of someone who knew exactly where those cameras were. The uniform was authentic. The credentials, he checked the security logs, were valid, cloned from a real employee named Rodriguez who'd called in sick yesterday. Professional. Calculated. Someone with resources and planning. This wasn't some opportunistic blackmailer. This was personal. His phone rang. His mother. Adrian stared at her name on the screen, remembering Sunday dinners in Queens, her pride when he'd gotten into Columbia, the way she'd cried when he bought her the condo in Florida. She still had the article framed in her living room, 30 Under 30, Wall Street's Rising Stars, with Adrian's photo above the headline, "The son of a teacher shows the elite how it's done." What would that article say in 24 hours? Son of teacher exposed as criminal. Billionaire built empire on blood money. Adrian Dawson, from Wall Street golden boy to federal prison. He didn't answer. Couldn't. What would he even say? Instead, Adrian pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Not a confession, not yet. A list. Everyone who might know about Brighton Beach. Everyone who'd been in his life in 2008. The list was shorter than he'd feared and longer than he'd hoped. The Russian, probably dead or disappeared. Other people at the bar that night, maybe, but how would they know the significance? His boss at the time, James Patterson, dead from a heart attack in 2015. His ex-girlfriend from back then, Clarice Starling, married and living in Connecticut, hadn't spoken to him in a decade. But there was one more name. One person who'd been on the periphery of that night, who'd asked questions later, who Adrian had paid off to keep quiet. Daniel Ocean, a private investigator he'd hired in 2009 to clean up loose ends. Ocean had asked too many questions, gotten too close to the truth. Adrian had given him $100,000 and a threat disguised as a promise: take the money and forget everything, or end up like the person they were both pretending didn't exist. Ocean had taken the money and disappeared. Until now? Adrian pulled up a search. Daniel Ocean, private investigator. The website was defunct, last updated in 2019. No social media. No current address. Like he'd vanished. Or like he'd been planning something for a very long time. Who do you think is blackmailing Adrian? Drop your theories in the comments. I love reading your detective work. And if you're hooked on this story, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. Adrian's intercom buzzed. Mr. Dawson, your 11 o'clock with Tokyo is ready. Right. The real world, where he still had a company to run, deals to close, a performance to maintain. He straightened his tie, smoothed his expression into the mask of confidence he'd worn for 16 years. Put them through, Vivian. For the next hour, Adrian negotiated a $340 million deal with investors in Tokyo, his voice steady, his mind sharp, every inch the billionaire titan that Forbes and Fortune wrote about. Inside, he was drowning. Inside, the clock was ticking. 20 hours left. The Tokyo deal closed at 12:47 p.m. Adrian had just made his company $340 million, and he felt absolutely nothing. He was staring at his legal pad, at Daniel Ocean's name circled 3 times, when Vivian's voice crackled through the intercom with an edge he'd never heard before. Mr. Dawson, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. She says it's about 2008. The room tilted. What's her name? Adrian's voice came out steady despite his heart trying to break through his ribs. A pause. Natasha Ripley. The name hit him like a freight train. Natasha. Christ. He hadn't heard that name, hadn't let himself think about her in years. Natasha Ripley, the investigative journalist for the Wall Street Journal who'd been digging into the financial collapse, who'd been getting too close to uncomfortable truths. The woman he'd had drinks with in December 2008, ostensibly to offer his perspective on the crisis, actually to figure out what she knew. The woman whose dark eyes and sharp mind had made him feel truly seen for the first time in his life, right when he was becoming someone who couldn't afford to be seen at all. They'd met 3 times. Each meeting had felt like a chess match where both players were pretending to play checkers. She'd asked questions he'd deflected. He'd offered information that led nowhere. And underneath it all had been something electric, something dangerous, something neither of them could acknowledge because she was investigating the world he was trying to conquer. Then she'd disappeared. Left the journal, according to the masthead. No forwarding information. He'd told himself he was relieved. He'd told himself a lot of things. Mr. Dawson? Vivian prompted. Send her in. Adrian stood, buttoned his jacket, and reminded himself that he was Adrian Dawson, billionaire, untouchable. Not the desperate 31-year-old she'd last seen 16 years ago. The door opened. Natasha Ripley looked like time had sharpened her instead of softening her. Still tall and slim, but with a wire-tight tension that hadn't been there before. Dark hair shorter now, just past her shoulders. Same intelligent eyes that had always made him feel like she could read the thoughts he wasn't saying. She wore black pants and a leather jacket, no briefcase, no notebook, not the journalist uniform he remembered. Hello, Adrian. Her voice was exactly as he remembered. Low, controlled, with an edge that suggested she was always thinking 3 moves ahead. Natasha. He gestured to the chair. This is a surprise. It's been 16 years. I know. She didn't sit. Instead, she walked to his window, looked out at the city spread below. Nice view. I guess destroying lives pays well. There it was. No pretense, no small talk. Pure Natasha. I don't know what you're talking about. She turned, and the look she gave him could have frozen fire. Don't insult both of us with the innocent act. I know what you did in 2008, Adrian. I've always known. The question is, are you going to tell the truth, or am I going to have to force your hand? Adrian's mind raced. You sent the note. What note? She seemed genuinely confused, which was worse than if she'd admitted it. Because if Natasha wasn't the blackmailer. Why are you here? He asked. Natasha pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it to show him. A photograph of a young woman, mid-20s, with auburn hair and nervous eyes. Recognize her? Adrian studied the photo. Something familiar in the features, but he couldn't place it. No. Should I? Her name is Isabella Dimitrov. She's the daughter of Viktor Dimitrov. Ring any bells now? The floor dropped out from under Adrian's world. Viktor Dimitrov. The Russian from the bar in Brighton Beach. The man with the cold eyes and the colder proposals. The man who'd offered Adrian a solution to his desperate problems, information about which companies would survive the crash, which wouldn't, who was cooking their books and who was clean. Information that had no legitimate source, that could only have come from inside the SEC or the FBI or someplace equally illegal. Information Adrian had used to make his first real fortune while everyone else was losing their shirts. Viktor died in 2009, Natasha continued. Officially, a car accident in Moscow. Unofficially, he was murdered because of what he knew and who he'd sold that information to. His wife died 6 months later. Their daughter, Isabella, grew up in the Russian foster system. She spent 16 years trying to piece together what her father had been involved in, who he'd worked with, why he'd died. Adrian's mouth was dry. And she found your name. Found records of money transfers. Found a witness who saw you with Viktor the night before he gave you the information that started your empire. Natasha's eyes were laser-focused. She came to me 3 months ago because she knew I'd investigated you back in 2008. She wanted help exposing you. Where is she now? That's the problem. Natasha stepped closer, and Adrian caught her scent, something like coffee and determination. She disappeared 4 days ago. Her apartment was ransacked. Her research was gone. And the last text I got from her said she was going to confront you directly, make you confess before she went public. The note. The blackmail. It wasn't some corporate enemy or Daniel Ocean. It was a dead Russian criminal's daughter, seeking revenge for a father she barely remembered. I didn't kill Viktor Dimitrov, Adrian said. But you knew him. You worked with him. You used information he provided, information that probably got him killed. Natasha's voice was cold. And now his daughter is missing, possibly dead, and you're the last link in the chain. I didn't hurt her. I don't even know her. Then who did? Because someone broke into her apartment 4 days ago. Someone took all her evidence. And someone sent her phone records a text from a burner phone yesterday telling her to back off or she'd end up like her father. Natasha pulled out a folded paper, slapped it on his desk. I pulled phone records. That burner pinged off a cell tower 3 blocks from here. Adrian stared at the paper. His building. Someone in his orbit. I need your help, Natasha said, and the admission seemed to cost her. Isabella trusted me to help her, and I failed her. She's either running scared or she's already dead, and either way, someone connected to you is responsible. So you're going to tell me everything about 2008, about Viktor Dimitrov, about who else knew about your arrangement. And we're going to find her before. Adrian's phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. I see you have company. Pretty thing. Would be a shame if Natasha ended up like Isabella. 18 hours left, Adrian. Confess, or everyone you've ever cared about learns what happens to people who dig too deep into your past. Attached was a photo, taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. Natasha entering Dawson Tower 20 minutes ago. They were being watched right now. Adrian handed Natasha the phone. Watched her face go pale as she read it. "That's not from Isabella," she said quietly. "No. It's from whoever took her." Adrian felt a terrible clarity settling over him. This wasn't just about his past catching up to him anymore. This was about someone using that past as a weapon, and now Natasha was in the crosshairs. "You need to leave. Now. Go somewhere public, somewhere safe. This person has already made one woman disappear." "I'm not running." Natasha's jaw set with that stubborn determination he remembered from their long-ago meetings. "Isabella came to me for help. I'm not abandoning her just because some coward with a camera thinks they can scare me. This isn't a story you can investigate, Natasha. This is dangerous. These people." "What people? Who are we really dealing with here, Adrian?" She leaned on his desk, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Because if this is just about some information Viktor Dimitrov sold you in 2008, that's insider trading. Illegal, yes. Career-ending, probably. But not worth multiple murders. So what else happened that night in Brighton Beach? What aren't you telling me?" Adrian looked at this woman who'd reappeared in his life like a ghost, who was demanding truths that could destroy him, who was in danger because a dead Russian's daughter had made her a target. He thought about Marianne, perfect and safe and completely unprepared for any of this. He thought about his mother, his company, his carefully constructed empire. And he thought about Isabella Dimitrov, 25 years old, maybe dead, maybe terrified and hiding, caught in the blast radius of decisions Adrian had made when she was 9 years old. 18 hours left. He could confess, lose everything, and hope that satisfied whoever was behind this. Or he could do what he did best, fight. Investigate. Find Isabella, find the blackmailer, and bury this the way he'd buried everything else. But this time, he wouldn't be alone. This time, he'd have Natasha, the one person who'd always seen through his carefully constructed masks, whose moral compass was so different from his own it might actually point toward a way out. "Lock the door," Adrian said quietly. Natasha's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "Lock the door. Sit down. And I'll tell you everything about November 14th, 2008. "But Natasha?" He looked directly at her, letting her see the fear and desperation he'd hidden from everyone else. "Once I tell you this, you're in it. All the way in. And I can't guarantee you'll survive knowing what I know." For a long moment, she studied him. Then she walked to the door, turned the lock with a decisive click, and sat in the leather chair across from his desk. "Start talking," she said. And Adrian Dawson, who'd built a career on secrets and lies, began telling the truth for the first time in 16 years. Outside the window, 47 floors below, someone watched through a telephoto lens and smiled. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. "What do you think happened that night in Brighton Beach? And who do you think is really behind the blackmail? Drop your theories below. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, smash that subscribe button because the twists are just getting started." Viktor Dimitrov wasn't just some Russian with insider information, Adrian began. He was FSB, Russian intelligence. Former, supposedly, but you never really leave that world. He was in New York running what he called consulting services for wealthy Russians trying to move money out of the country during the crash. Natasha pulled out her phone, started recording. Adrian should have objected. Instead, he felt relieved. Finally, someone else would carry this weight. "I met him at Oceana Bar on Brighton Beach Avenue. November 14th, 2008, around 10 p.m. I was desperate, I'd leveraged everything on positions that were collapsing. I was 2 weeks away from bankruptcy, maybe prison for margin violations. A colleague had mentioned this Russian who could help people in tight spots." Adrian's hands clenched on his desk. "I thought he'd offer a loan. Maybe a money laundering scheme. But he offered information instead. He offered certainty in the middle of chaos." Adrian stood, unable to sit still. He knew which financial institutions were about to fail. Not speculation, actual knowledge. He had sources inside the SEC, the Treasury Department, maybe the FBI. He told me exactly which companies to short, which to buy, when to move. That's insider trading on a massive scale. That's survival. That's the difference between losing everything and building what I have now. Adrian turned to face her. I gave him $200,000 I didn't have, borrowed from loan sharks, maxed out credit cards. He gave me a list of 20 companies and what would happen to them over the next 6 months. Every single prediction came true. I made $11 million in 4 months. Natasha's expression was unreadable. So you committed multiple felonies and built your empire on illegal information. That's what you've been hiding. That's what I thought I'd been hiding. Adrian sat on the edge of his desk, closer to her now. Close enough to see the pulse at her throat, the way her fingers tightened on her phone. But 3 weeks after our first meeting, Victor called me in a panic. He said someone had figured out what he was doing, that he needed to disappear. He wanted more money, $500,000, to get out of the country and keep quiet about our arrangement. Did you pay him? I met him at the same bar. December 3, 2008. I had the money in a briefcase, cash I'd pulled from my first profits. We sat in the back corner. He was sweating, paranoid, kept looking at the door. The memory was vivid, crystalline. He said he'd sold the same information to 6 other people. Said one of them was someone powerful, someone connected, someone who couldn't afford to have their name attached to him. Who? He wouldn't tell me. But he was terrified. He kept saying, they know how to make people disappear. They've done it before. Adrian met Natasha's eyes. I gave him the money. He left through the back exit. That was the last time I saw him alive. He died in Moscow 3 months later. Officially. But I got a call the next morning, December 4th, from a blocked number. A woman's voice, American, educated. She said, the problem has been handled. You never met Viktor Dimitrov. You never received any information. If you speak about this to anyone, you'll join him. Then she hung up. Natasha stopped recording. Someone had him killed. Someone powerful enough to have him murdered in Russia and make it look like an accident. Someone who knew about me, about our arrangement, and decided I was worth keeping alive as long as I stayed quiet. Adrian's voice dropped. I've spent 16 years wondering who that woman was. Who had that kind of reach, that kind of power. And you just went on with your life. Built your company, got engaged, became a billionaire? What was I supposed to do? Go to the police and confess to insider trading and possible involvement in a murder conspiracy? I was 31 years old, Natasha. I was terrified. He ran a hand through his hair. I buried it. Used the money to make more money, this time legitimately. Became so successful, so visible, that I thought I was untouchable. Until Isabella came looking for answers about her father. Until now. Adrian pulled out the blackmail note, showed it to her. Whoever sent this knows about Brighton Beach. But the question is, are they Isabella, or are they the person who had Victor killed? Natasha stood, paced to the window. Her leather jacket creaked softly. If it's Isabella, she's a victim seeking justice for her murdered father. If it's the other person, they're using her as a pawn to flush you out. Either way, she's in danger. We're both in danger. Adrian moved to stand beside her. Side by side, they looked out at the city. The woman on the phone 16 years ago, she's the key. Find her, we find who's behind this. You said her voice was educated, American. Anything else? Accent? Age? Adrian closed his eyes, trying to pull details from a memory he'd tried to forget. 30s, maybe 40s. East Coast accent, but subtle. Confident. She didn't make threats, she stated facts. Like she'd done this before. And Victor said one of his other clients was someone powerful and connected. Natasha turned to face him, close enough that he could feel the heat of her. Who was operating at that level in 2008 with something to hide? Half of Wall Street. Every hedge fund manager, every investment banker who saw the crash coming and positioned themselves to profit. But how many would have the connections to order a hit in Moscow? Someone with international reach. Someone with ties to intelligence communities or organized crime. Adrian felt the weight of those words. Someone who's been watching me for 16 years, making sure I stayed silent. His phone buzzed. Marianne. Where are you? We're supposed to meet the wedding planner at 2. You promised you wouldn't miss this one. The wedding. His perfect fiancée. The life he was supposed to be living right now, instead of confessing crimes to the woman whose dark eyes had haunted him for 16 years. You need to answer that, Natasha said, something unreadable in her voice. It's my fiancé. I know who Marianne Sheffield is. Everyone knows. Senator's daughter, socialite, your ticket to political respectability. Natasha stepped back, creating distance. Does she know about any of this? No. She knows Adrian Dawson, successful businessman. She doesn't know the man who made deals with Russian criminals. Lucky her. Natasha's tone had an edge now. She gets the fairy tale while the rest of us deal with the bodies in your foundation. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Adrian. Isabella's father is dead. She's missing. I've spent 16 years wondering why you disappeared after our last meeting, and now I know, you were too busy building an empire on blood money too. You disappeared, Adrian cut her off. You left the journal. No forwarding information. I looked for you. The words hung between them, admission and accusation both. You looked for me, Natasha repeated softly. Why? Because those 3 meetings had felt like the only real thing in his increasingly fake life. Because her questions had made him want to be someone who could answer them honestly. Because when she'd looked at him, she'd seen something other than dollar signs and opportunities. But he couldn't say any of that. Not with Marianne's text still glowing on his phone. Not with 17 hours left and a missing woman and a blackmailer circling. We should focus on finding Isabella, Adrian said instead, and watched disappointment flicker across Natasha's face. His desk phone rang. Vivian. Mr. Dawson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a Detective Sarah Connor from the NYPD here. She says it's urgent. Adrian and Natasha locked eyes. The police. Already. Send her in, Adrian said. Detective Sarah Connor was 50-something, sharp-eyed, with gray-streaked hair pulled back and the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much and believed too little. She showed her badge, sized up both Adrian and Natasha in a single glance. Mr. Dawson. I'm investigating the disappearance of Isabella Dimitrov. Her roommate reported her missing 3 days ago. Connor's gaze shifted to Natasha. And you are? Natasha Ripley. I'm a journalist working with Isabella on a story. What kind of story? Financial crimes from the 2008 crash, Natasha said smoothly. Isabella's father was involved in some questionable transactions before his death. She was trying to expose the people he worked with. Connor pulled out a notebook. And that brought her to you, Mr. Dawson? I've never met Isabella Dimitrov, Adrian said. Technically true. I don't know anything about her disappearance. But you knew her father. Victor Dimitrov. It wasn't a question. We pulled Isabella's research from cloud storage. Your name was all over it. Photos of you from 2008. Bank records showing cash withdrawals around the time you met with Victor. Phone records. Adrian felt the walls closing in. I'd like to speak with my attorney before. I'm not accusing you of anything. Yet. Connor leaned against the doorframe, casual but blocking the exit. I'm just wondering why a billionaire who's about to marry into political royalty would have business with a Russian intelligence operative back in 2008. And why that operative's daughter would disappear right before she was set to publish an exposé about you. I don't know why she disappeared. But you do know something. Otherwise Ms. Ripley wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't look like a man with 17 hours until his world ends. Connor smiled without warmth. Yes, I know about the note. We found an identical one in Isabella's apartment. I know what you did in 2008. You have 24 hours to confess. Same cutout letters, same cardstock. She received hers 5 days ago. Natasha stepped forward. Isabella sent Adrian the note? Or someone sent them both notes? Someone who wants the truth about 2008 to come out and doesn't care who gets hurt in the process. Connor's eyes never left Adrian. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about Viktor Dimitrov, about what you did in 2008, about who else might have been involved. And I'm going to try to find Isabella before whoever's playing puppet master decides she's more useful dead than missing. Adrian looked at Natasha, who gave the smallest nod. They were out of options. I want immunity, Adrian said. For what crimes, specifically? Insider trading. Conspiracy. Whatever else you think you can charge me with for using information Viktor Dimitrov provided. Adrian straightened his shoulders. In exchange, I'll tell you everything. Names, dates, transactions. Everything that might help you find Isabella. Connor studied him for a long moment. I'll need to talk to the DA. But Mr. Dawson? If this girl ends up dead, no amount of cooperation will save you. Understood? Understood. When Connor left to make calls, Natasha turned on Adrian. Immunity? You're trying to save yourself while Isabella's out there. I'm trying to keep myself out of prison long enough to actually help find her, Adrian shot back. Because if I'm arrested right now, the blackmailer wins. I confess publicly, my life ends, and we still don't know who's behind this or where Isabella is. This isn't about you anymore. It's always been about me. That's the point. Adrian's control finally cracked. Someone wants to destroy me specifically. They took Isabella, sent us both notes, and they're watching to see if I'll break. Well, I'm not breaking. I'm going to find out who this is, get Isabella back, and end this before anyone else gets hurt. How? By making more deals? By buying your way out like you always do? By doing what I should have done 16 years ago, finding the woman who called me after Viktor died. She's the key. She had him killed, she's probably behind this now, and if we can identify her. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Both he and Natasha froze. Adrian put it on speaker. The same distorted voice from before, touching scene. The detective, the journalist, the confession. Very noble, Adrian. But here's the thing, I don't want your confession to the police. I want it public. I want the world to see you fall. And since you're being stubborn. A new photo appeared on the screen. Marianne, sitting in a restaurant, laughing at something across the table. The wedding planner, probably. The timestamp, 14:23. 23 minutes ago. Marianne knows nothing about this, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. Leave her out of it. Then confess. Full press conference. Every detail of what you did in 2008. By midnight, or I send everything to the Times, the Journal, the FBI, and as a bonus, I'll make sure Marianne and her dear father the senator understand exactly who you really are. The voice paused. Oh, and Adrian? Stop looking for Isabella. You're not going to find her. No one is. The line went dead. Natasha's face had gone white. They just confirmed Isabella's dead. Or they want us to think she is. Adrian was already moving, grabbing his jacket. Connor's going to get her warrant, tear my life apart. The blackmailer's watching everyone close to me. We have 16.5 hours to find answers, and we can't do it from here. Where are we going? Brighton Beach. Back to where it started. He looked at her, this woman who'd walked back into his life at exactly the right moment or exactly the wrong one. You coming? Natasha grabbed her jacket. Try to stop me. Things are escalating fast. Who do you think the mystery woman is? Drop your theories in the comments, I'm reading every single one. As they headed for the elevator, Adrian's phone buzzed again. Text from Thomas, mate, I don't know what's going on, but Harrison just got a call from the SEC. They're asking questions about 2008. What did you do? The walls weren't just closing in anymore. They were already here. The drive to Brighton Beach took 45 minutes through afternoon traffic that felt like it was deliberately conspiring against them. Adrian drove his Aston Martin in tense silence while Natasha worked her phone, pulling up everything she could find on Viktor Dimitrov's last known associates. His wife was named Oksana, Natasha said, scrolling. Died in 2009, 6 months after Viktor. Official cause, suicide. Overdose of sleeping pills. Convenient. There's a photo here. She turned the phone to show him. A dark-haired woman with tired eyes, standing next to Viktor at what looked like a Brighton Beach cafe. This is from 2007. Isabella would have been about 9 in this picture. Adrian glanced at it, then back to the road. Something nagged at him about the photo, but he couldn't place it. What about Isabella? What did she do between her mother's death and now? Russian foster system until she was 18, then she immigrated to the US on a student visa. Studied finance at Baruch College. Worked at a boutique investment firm for 2 years, then quit last year to focus on investigating her father's death full-time. Natasha's fingers flew across the screen. She's been meticulous. Built a whole timeline of Viktor's activities in 2008, tracked down 5 of the 6 people he sold information to. 5? Who are they? 3 are dead. 2 died in the crash itself, leveraged positions that went bad. The 3rd had a heart attack in 2012. The other 2 are both convicted of insider trading for unrelated cases. One's in federal prison, the other took a plea deal and retired to the Cayman Islands. And number 6? That's the mystery. Isabella's notes just say Subject X, high-level political connections, still active, extremely dangerous. Natasha looked at him. She thought Subject X was the one who had her father killed. Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Did she have any leads on who it might be? If she did, she didn't write them down. Or whoever ransacked her apartment took those notes specifically. Natasha paused. Adrian, what if Subject X is the one behind all of this? What if they've been watching all of Viktor's clients for 16 years, and Isabella's investigation triggered something? Then we're walking into a trap by going back to Brighton Beach. Probably. You could still get out. I can drop you somewhere safe. We've been over this. Natasha's voice was firm. I'm seeing this through. They crossed into Brighton Beach, the neighborhood unchanged from Adrian's memories. Same boardwalk, same Russian signage on shops and restaurants, same mix of old world and new that made it feel like a pocket of Moscow transplanted to Brooklyn. Adrian parked 3 blocks from Oceana Bar. The late afternoon sun slanted through the buildings, casting long shadows that felt ominous. It's probably not even there anymore, Adrian said as they walked. 16 years, different owners. He stopped. Oceana Bar looked exactly the same. Same neon sign, same grimy windows, same sense of being a place where people went to make deals they didn't want recorded. That's not possible, Natasha murmured. They pushed through the door into dim lighting and the smell of old alcohol and older secrets. A handful of patrons scattered at tables. Behind the bar, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair looked up from polishing glasses. Her eyes met Adrian's, and something like recognition flickered across her face. We're closed for private party, she said in a thick Russian accent. We just need to ask some questions, Natasha said, pulling out her phone with Isabella's photo. Have you seen this woman? Her name is Isabella Dimitrov. The bartender's expression didn't change. Yes. She was here 4 days ago. Asked many questions about her father. Adrian stepped forward. What did you tell her? Same thing I tell you, I don't remember nothing from 2008. Too long ago. Too many customers. But her eyes said different. She remembered everything. Viktor Dimitrov was murdered because of something that happened here, Adrian said. His daughter is missing, possibly dead. If you know anything, you're the one. The bartender pointed at Adrian with a glass. November 14, 2008. You sat right there. She indicated a corner booth. Viktor was nervous. Kept looking at door. You gave him briefcase, he gave you envelope. Then you left. That's right. You should have stayed away. Coming back here, you wake up old ghosts. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. The woman told me you might come. Adrian's heart stopped. What woman? The one who came after Viktor died. American woman, very elegant. She paid me $10,000 to remember nothing, and to call her if anyone ever asked questions about Viktor. The bartender pulled out an old flip phone from under the bar. She said if Viktor's daughter ever showed up, or if you ever came back, I should let her know. Did you call her when Isabella came? The bartender's silence was answer enough. And are you going to call her now? Natasha asked. Already did. When I saw you park across the street. The woman's face was unreadable. She said to keep you here. She's coming. Adrian grabbed Natasha's arm. We need to leave. Now. They turned toward the door just as it opened. The woman who walked in was 60-something, impeccably dressed in a camel coat and Hermes scarf, with silver hair in an elegant chignon. She looked like she should be having tea at the plaza, not walking into a dive bar in Brighton Beach. But her eyes, sharp, cold, calculating, those were the eyes of someone who'd made careers end and people disappear. Adrian Dawson, she said, her voice cultured and calm. I wondered if you'd be smart enough to come here, or stupid enough. I see it's the latter. It was the voice from the phone. 16 years older, but unmistakable. Who are you? Adrian demanded. Someone who's been cleaning up Viktor Dimitrov's messes for a very long time. She gestured to a booth. Sit. We have things to discuss, and I'd prefer not to have this conversation standing. We're not doing anything until you tell us where Isabella is, Natasha said. The woman smiled. Isabella is perfectly safe. In fact, she's right outside. Would you like to meet her? She pulled out her phone, typed something, and waited. A moment later, the door opened again. The young woman who walked in had auburn hair and nervous eyes, exactly like her photo. Isabella Dimitrov, alive and seemingly unharmed. But she wasn't looking at Adrian or Natasha with fear or relief. She was looking at the older woman with something like respect. Or obedience. Hello, Ms. Caldwell, Isabella said softly. Caldwell. The name triggered something in Adrian's memory. Where had he heard it before? Isabella, Natasha breathed. Thank God you're safe. We've been looking for you. I know. That was the point. Isabella's voice was apologetic but firm. I'm sorry, Ms. Ripley. You were never supposed to be involved. But you kept pushing, kept investigating, and Ms. Caldwell said the only way to keep you safe was to bring you in. Adrian's mind raced. You sent the notes. Both of them. I sent mine to myself, yes. To establish a timeline, create a paper trail. Isabella looked at him now, and her nervous energy was gone, replaced by cold determination. You ruined my father. You used his information, built your empire on it, and when he needed help getting away from the people who wanted him dead, you did nothing. I gave him money. You gave him money and let him walk into an execution. Isabella's composure cracked. Ms. Caldwell told me everything. How my father was FSB, how he was selling classified information, how he got in over his head with people who don't forgive mistakes. How you and the others used him and threw him away. Adrian turned to the older woman, Caldwell. You had Victor killed. I didn't have to. The FSB did that themselves when they discovered he was selling state secrets to Americans. Caldwell sat in the booth, crossed her legs elegantly. I simply made sure the evidence trail led away from certain people who couldn't afford the exposure. Including you, Mr. Dawson. You're welcome, by the way. Who are you? Catherine Caldwell. I was deputy director of the CIA's National Clandestine Service in 2008. Now I'm retired and doing private consulting. Her smile was razor thin. Viktor Dimitrov was one of our assets. He was supposed to be feeding us information about Russian oligarchs moving money through U.S. banks. Instead, he started running his own side business, selling SEC and Treasury information to desperate traders like yourself. The room tilted. CIA Victor had been working for U.S. intelligence. When we discovered what he was doing, we had a choice, Caldwell continued. Expose him and risk exposing our entire Russian financial intelligence operation, or shut him down quietly. We chose the latter. The FSB did our work for us, they killed him for being a traitor. We just made sure it happened in Moscow instead of New York, where it might have raised uncomfortable questions. Natasha's voice was shaking. You're admitting to being complicit in murder. I'm admitting to protecting national security. There's a difference. Caldwell's gaze shifted to her. And now, Ms. Ripley, you and Mr. Dawson have a choice. Walk away, forget everything you've learned, and live your lives. Or keep digging, and discover that some secrets are buried under too much power to ever see daylight. And Isabella? Adrian asked. Isabella has been working with me for 6 months. She came looking for revenge, and I gave her something better, truth. Her father wasn't a criminal. He was a patriot who made mistakes. And the people who used him, she looked pointedly at Adrian, they're the real criminals. So this whole thing has been what? A setup to get me to confess? This whole thing has been a test, Caldwell said. To see if you'd do the right thing when pushed, or if you'd try to save yourself like you did in 2008. So far, you're failing. Isabella stepped forward, and Adrian saw tears in her eyes now. My father tried to do the right thing. He tried to get out, to protect his family. You could have helped him. Instead, you took your money and ran. I was 31 years old and terrified. And now you're 47 and a billionaire built on blood money. Isabella's voice broke. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to confess. Publicly. You're going to admit to insider trading, to working with my father, to everything you did in 2008. You're going to lose your company, your fiancé, your reputation. And maybe then, my father's death will mean something. Adrian looked at Natasha, who was pale and shaking. At Isabella, who'd orchestrated this whole elaborate trap. At Catherine Caldwell, former CIA, who'd covered up an execution and was now demanding his destruction. And if I refuse? Caldwell pulled out a tablet, turned it to face him. A video played, grainy security footage from Oceana Bar, November 14, 2008. Adrian and Victor in the corner booth. The briefcase exchange. Crystal clear evidence of their transaction. This goes to the FBI, the SEC, every news organization in the country. Along with bank records, witness testimony, and a detailed account of how you used classified information to make your fortune. Caldwell's smile was pleasant and terrifying. Your empire ends either way, Mr. Dawson. The only question is whether you end it with dignity by confessing, or in handcuffs. There's a third option, Natasha said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. We expose all of it. Not just Adrian's crimes, but yours too, Ms. Caldwell. The CIA's involvement with Victor. The cover-up. The fact that you've been blackmailing American citizens to protect your own legacy. Natasha's voice grew stronger. You're retired now. No diplomatic immunity. No government protection. Just a former spy who's been running illegal operations for 16 years. Caldwell's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. You have no proof, she said. I have this conversation. I've been recording since we walked in. Natasha held up her phone. And I have Isabella, who can testify about how you've been manipulating her, using her grief to execute your personal vendetta. And I have Adrian, who's willing to confess to his crimes, if you confess to yours. Adrian stared at Natasha. She was bluffing, she had to be. Going up against a former CIA deputy director was suicide. But God, she was magnificent. Caldwell stood slowly. You're playing a very dangerous game, Ms. Ripley. So are you. The difference is, I'm not afraid of the consequences anymore. Natasha stepped closer to Adrian, and he felt the warmth of her beside him. United front. Here's what's actually going to happen. Adrian confesses to insider trading. He faces the legal consequences. But you leave Isabella alone. You destroy whatever leverage you have, and you disappear back into your retirement. Or I publish everything, and we all go down together. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Caldwell laughed. Actually laughed, the sound genuine and almost admiring. You've got spine, I'll give you that. She looked at Isabella. What do you think? Is watching him lose everything enough, or do you need him in prison too? Isabella's eyes were wet. I don't know anymore. I thought I wanted revenge. But seeing him here, seeing what this is costing him. She looked at Adrian. Did you care about my father at all? Even a little? Adrian thought about that desperate night, the Russian with the cold eyes who'd offered salvation. I barely knew him. But I've thought about him every day for 16 years. What happened to him, what I might have prevented if I'd been braver. He met Isabella's gaze. I'm sorry. That doesn't fix anything, but it's true. Something in Isabella's expression cracked. Ms. Caldwell, she said softly. Let them go. Isabella. Let them go. This isn't justice. It's just more pain. Isabella turned to leave, then paused. My father would have liked that you remembered him, Mr. Dawson. Even if you didn't help him. She walked out of the bar, into the fading daylight. Caldwell watched her go, then turned back to Adrian and Natasha. You're very lucky she's more merciful than I am. But Ms. Ripley's right, I have my own reputation to protect. So here's the deal, confess to the insider trading. Face whatever legal consequences come. But you don't mention Viktor Dimitrov, you don't mention the CIA, and you don't mention me. As far as anyone knows, you figured out the crash on your own. And in exchange? In exchange, you get to keep breathing. Caldwell headed for the door. Oh, and Mr. Dawson? That fiancée of yours? Marianne Sheffield? Her father, the senator, sits on the Intelligence Committee. Might want to think carefully about what you tell her. Some families don't appreciate being connected to scandals. She left, the door closing behind her with terrible finality. Adrian and Natasha stood in the empty bar, the bartender having conveniently disappeared into the back. Did we just win or lose? Adrian asked. Yes, Natasha said. Then she started laughing, the kind of borderline hysterical laughter that comes after narrowly escaping death. Adrian found himself laughing too, the tension of the last 18 hours finally breaking. When the laughter faded, they were standing very close, close enough that Adrian could count the flecks of gold in her eyes. Thank you, he said quietly. For having my back in there. For the bluff about recording. Who said it was a bluff? Natasha held up her phone, showed him the recording app, still running. Adrian's eyes widened. You actually. Insurance. In case Caldwell decides to come after us anyway. She stopped the recording, her hand shaking slightly. I can't believe I just threatened a former CIA director. I can't believe she backed down. She didn't. She just decided we're more useful alive than dead. For now. Natasha looked at him. You know you still have to confess, right? To the insider trading. Probably prison time. Definitely the end of your company, your engagement, everything. I know. And you're still going to do it? Adrian thought about Marianne, perfect and innocent. About his mother, who'd be heartbroken. About his empire, built on lies and blood money. About the man he'd been versus the man he could still become. Yeah, he said. I'm going to do it. But not because Caldwell demanded it. Because it's right. Because I should have done it 16 years ago. Natasha's expression softened. For what it's worth, I think that's the first genuinely honest thing I've ever heard you say. Then you should hear this too. Adrian took her hand, felt her pulse jumping under his fingers. When this is over, when I've confessed, served whatever time I have to serve, lost everything, I'm going to find you. And I'm going to ask if you'll give me a chance to be the person you made me want to be 16 years ago. Adrian. I know I don't deserve it. I know I'm about to throw a grenade into my life. But Natasha? He squeezed her hand. You're the only real thing I've had in 16 years of carefully constructed lies. So I'm asking, wait for me? She looked at him for a long moment, those dark eyes searching his face for truth. Then she pulled him down and kissed him. It was brief, fierce, and tasted like possibility. When she pulled back, she said, ask me again after you've confessed. After you've actually done the right thing. Then we'll see. It wasn't a yes. But it wasn't a no. And for the first time since he'd found that note on his desk, Adrian Dawson felt something like hope. Okay, confession time, pun intended. Did you see that CIA twist coming? Drop a comment with your reaction. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button because this story still has major twists ahead. Outside, the sun was setting over Brighton Beach. Adrian had 12 hours left. Time to decide what kind of man he wanted to be when the smoke cleared. Adrian dropped Natasha at her apartment in Brooklyn at 8 p.m., the kiss still burning on his lips, her words echoing in his head, ask me again after you've actually done the right thing. He drove toward his penthouse, rehearsing the words in his head. He'd call a press conference for tomorrow morning. Confess to insider trading. Face the consequences. Start over as someone who told the truth. His phone rang. Marianne. For a moment, Adrian considered not answering. But he owed her honesty, even if it destroyed them. Hey, he said. Where have you been? Marianne's voice was tight. You missed the wedding planner. You missed dinner with Daddy. Adrian, what's going on? I need to talk to you. In person. Can I come over? A pause. I'm at your place. I used my key. I thought we could talk about why you've been so distant lately. His penthouse. Where the blackmail note still sat in his desk drawer. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Adrian said. He made it in 15, his heart hammering. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt like ascending to an execution. Marianne was standing at the window when he walked in, still wearing the dress she'd worn for the wedding planner. Beautiful and perfect and about to have her world shattered. I'm ending the engagement, Adrian said. No preamble. No soft landing. Marianne turned, her face confused rather than hurt. What? I'm not the man you think I am. And tomorrow, everyone's going to know it. He moved to the bar, poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. I've done things, Marianne. Illegal things. Things that are going to destroy my reputation and probably put me in prison. Adrian, you're scaring me. What are you talking about? In 2008, I committed insider trading. Used classified information to make my fortune. Everything I've built is based on a crime. The words came easier than he'd expected. Maybe because he'd already said them to Natasha. Tomorrow morning, I'm confessing. The SEC will investigate. I'll lose the company. And I won't let you be dragged down with me. Marianne's perfect composure cracked. You're serious. I'm sorry. You deserve better than this. Better than me. She was quiet for a long moment, and Adrian waited for tears, for anger, for something. Instead, she laughed. Short and bitter. Do you know why Daddy wanted me to marry you? Marianne set down her wine glass with a sharp click. Because you're exactly like him. Rich men who think rules don't apply to them. Who make their fortunes in gray areas and call it business acumen. Marianne. I knew something was off about you, Adrian. Nobody builds an empire that fast by playing fair. I just didn't care because you gave me what I needed, status, wealth, the fairy tale. She grabbed her purse. But if you're actually going to confess, if you're actually going to face consequences? Then you're right. I do deserve better. She walked to the door, paused. For what it's worth, I hope prison teaches you something. Like maybe how the rest of us have to live with our choices. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. Adrian stood alone in his penthouse, surrounded by expensive things that suddenly meant nothing. His phone buzzed. Text from Thomas, SEC just served us with subpoenas. What the hell did you do? Call me now. Another text, from his lawyer, don't say anything to anyone until we talk. This is serious, Adrian. Another, from his mother, Adrian, someone called saying you're in trouble. Please call me back. I'm worried. And then one more. Unknown number. Congratulations. You chose the hard way. But here's something Catherine Caldwell didn't tell you, I still have the evidence. And I'm not Isabella or some retired CIA director. I'm someone who wants to watch you burn. Press conference at 9 a.m. tomorrow, or I release everything to the media tonight, including photos of you and Natasha at Brighton Beach. Wonder what she'll think when she's dragged into your scandal. Adrian's blood went cold. Someone else. There was someone else who'd been watching, waiting. He called Natasha. Straight to voicemail. He called again. Nothing. A third time and finally she answered. Adrian? What's wrong? Are you safe? Are you home? Yes, I'm home. What's? Lock your doors. Don't let anyone in. There's someone else involved, someone who. The line went dead. Adrian called back. The number was disconnected. He was out the door and in his car in 30 seconds, racing toward Brooklyn, his mind spinning through possibilities. Who else knew? Who else had been watching? The traffic felt like tar. Every red light an eternity. He called Detective Connor, got voicemail, left a frantic message about Natasha being in danger. 23 minutes later, he screeched to a stop outside Natasha's building. The front door was ajar. Adrian took the stairs 3 at a time, burst into the 4th-floor hallway. Natasha's apartment door was open. Natasha. He rushed inside. The apartment was ransacked. Furniture overturned, paper scattered, laptop smashed on the floor. And on the wall, written in red paint. She knows too much. Just like Victor. Just like Isabella should have. Confess by 9 a.m. or she disappears forever. Adrian's phone buzzed. A video message. His hand shook as he opened it. Natasha, bound to a chair in some concrete room, a gag over her mouth, terror in her eyes. The camera panned to show a figure in shadow, then back to her face. A distorted voice, 9 a.m. Adrian. Full confession. Or she becomes another ghost in your collection. The video ended. Adrian fell to his knees in Natasha's destroyed apartment, surrounded by evidence of violence, holding a phone that showed the one person who'd made him want to be better trapped because of him. He thought he'd hit bottom when Marianne left. He thought he understood consequences. But this, Natasha in danger because she'd tried to help him, this was hell. And he had 11 hours to figure out who was behind it before he lost her forever. Adrian was still on his knees in Natasha's apartment when his phone rang. Detective Connor. I got your message, she said. I'm 10 minutes out. Don't touch anything. They have her. They have Natasha, and I don't know who. Adrian, listen to me. We found Isabella 20 minutes ago. The real Isabella. Adrian's world stopped. What? She was locked in a storage unit in Queens. Drugged, dehydrated, but alive. She's been there for 4 days. Connor's voice was grim. The woman you met at the bar? That wasn't Isabella Dimitrov. The auburn-haired girl. The nervous eyes. I'm sorry, Ms. Ripley. You were never supposed to be involved. It had all been an act. Catherine Caldwell, Adrian breathed. She had a fake Isabella. We're trying to locate Caldwell now. But Adrian, the real Isabella told us something important. Her father kept a ledger. Names of everyone he sold information to, including Subject X. She hid it before she was taken. Where? That's the problem. She told one person where it was. The only person she trusted with the information. Adrian's heart stopped. Natasha. Natasha knew where the ledger was. Which means whoever took her is after the ledger, not me. The pieces clicked into place. The confession was never the real goal. It was about getting close to Natasha, finding out what she knew. Adrian's mind raced back through the day. The fake Isabella at the bar had watched Natasha carefully, asked specific questions about her research. Caldwell had been too calm, too willing to let them walk away. Because they'd gotten what they needed. Where would Natasha hide something important? Connor asked. Adrian looked around the ransacked apartment. They'd searched everywhere. Unless. He ran to Natasha's desk, pulled out drawers already emptied by the searchers. Nothing. Then he remembered, 6 months ago, when they'd first met in 2008, she'd shown him a photo of herself as a child at the Coney Island Library. My safe place, she'd said. Where I went whenever the world got too loud. The library, Adrian said. Coney Island Library. That's where she'd hide it. I'll meet you there, Connor said. Don't do anything stupid. Adrian was already running. The library was closed when Adrian arrived, but he knew Natasha. She wouldn't hide something in plain sight. He circled to the back, found the old stone bench she'd mentioned once, carved with initials from decades of visitors. NR plus truth equals forever. She'd carved it herself at 16, she'd told him. A promise to always seek truth. Adrian knelt, felt along the base of the bench. His fingers found a gap in the stones, and inside, wrapped in plastic, a small leather notebook. Viktor Dimitrov's ledger. He opened it with shaking hands. Names. Dates. Amounts. 6 clients, just like Isabella had said. 5 names he recognized from Natasha's research. And the 6th, Senator Richard Sheffield. $2 million. October 2008. Insurance position shorts plus Treasury inside information. Marianne's father. The senator who sat on the Intelligence Committee. Who'd been positioning himself for a presidential run. Who'd needed his daughter to marry someone respectable and wealthy to complete his perfect family image. Senator Sheffield, who would lose everything if it came out that he'd committed insider trading during the financial crisis. Adrian's phone buzzed. Video call from unknown number. He answered. Senator Sheffield's face filled the screen, silver-haired and distinguished, standing in what looked like a warehouse. Behind him, Natasha was still bound to the chair, but her eyes were alert, angry. Adrian, the senator said pleasantly. I see you found Victor's little insurance policy. Clever man, keeping records. Foolish, but clever. Let her go. This is between us. This stopped being between us when she started investigating. When Isabella started asking questions. When that Russian fool's secrets threatened to surface after 16 years. Sheffield's smile was cold. I've spent decades building my career. I won't let it end because of one mistake made during a crisis. You had Victor killed. You had Isabella kidnapped. I had Catherine Caldwell handle problems. That's what intelligence assets do. The senator moved closer to the camera. But then you had to develop a conscience. Had to consider confessing. And Ms. Ripley here had to be a crusading journalist who couldn't leave well enough alone. The fake Isabella, Adrian said. That was your play? Catherine's idea. Use the girl's own investigation against you, make you think it was all resolved, all handled. But Natasha knew too much. She had to be dealt with. Natasha made a muffled sound through her gag. Here's what happens now, Sheffield continued. You bring me that ledger. You forget everything you learned. And maybe, Ms. Ripley lives. Or you go to the police, and she dies, and I make sure you're implicated in her murder. Adrian looked at the ledger in his hands. Evidence that could destroy a senator. Save Natasha. End this. Where? He asked. Red Hook Marine Terminal. Pier 12. 1 hour. Come alone, or she dies. The screen went black. Adrian stared at Victor's ledger, then at his phone. He could call Connor, bring the police, do this the right way. Or he could save Natasha himself and end this the way it should have ended 16 years ago, with the truth. He took a photo of every page of the ledger. Sent them to Connor, to Natasha's cloud storage, to 3 different email addresses. Then he got in his car and drove toward Red Hook. Toward the senator who'd orchestrated all of this. Toward Natasha, who'd believed he could be better. Toward the ending he should have chosen in 2008. 9 hours until the deadline. 1 ledger. 1 chance to save her. What would you do? Comment below. Pier 12 was abandoned, just rusted shipping containers and shadows. Adrian's headlights cut through the darkness as he pulled up to the warehouse Sheffield had specified. He stepped out, ledger in hand. Senator Sheffield emerged from the warehouse, immaculate even now in a tailored suit. Behind him, 2 men in tactical gear flanked Natasha, still bound but on her feet. The ledger, Sheffield demanded. Let her go first. You're not in a position to negotiate. Sheffield nodded, and one of the men pressed a gun to Natasha's head. Adrian's blood turned to ice. But then he saw it, Natasha's eyes, sharp and focused, looking past him. A message. He wasn't alone. You made one mistake, Senator, Adrian said, louder than necessary. You assumed I'd be stupid enough to come alone. Just like you assumed no one would ever connect you to Viktor Dimitrov. Sheffield's expression flickered. You're bluffing. Am I? Adrian held up his phone. I sent photos of every page of this ledger to the FBI, the SEC, and Detective Sarah Connor of the NYPD. Who, by the way, is listening to this entire conversation. He turned the phone to show the active call. FBI. Drop your weapons. The shout came from behind the containers as a dozen agents swarmed the pier, Connor leading them. Sheffield's men released Natasha and raised their hands. But the senator just smiled, cold and calculating. You think this ends with my arrest? I have connections that reach. Had connections, a new voice said. Catherine Caldwell stepped out of the shadows, and for once she didn't look composed. She looked furious. You used my network. My resources. My fake Isabella operation, which was meant to assess the threat level, not kidnap journalists. Caldwell walked straight up to Sheffield. I spent 16 years protecting assets and secrets. Not enabling a senator's presidential ambitions. Catherine, we had an agreement. We had an understanding. You crossed a line when you took that woman. Caldwell turned to Connor. Detective, I believe you'll find Senator Sheffield's communications with his men quite illuminating. I've already forwarded them to your office. Sheffield's face went white. You're CIA. You can't. I'm retired. I can do whatever I want. Caldwell's smile was knife-sharp. Consider this my resignation from your service, Senator. Enjoy federal prison. The FBI led Sheffield away in handcuffs, his protests fading into the night. Adrian ran to Natasha as Connor cut her bonds. She collapsed into his arms, shaking. You came, she whispered. Always, he said. I'll always come for you. Connor approached, tablet in hand. Mr. Dawson, we still need to discuss your involvement in the 2008 insider trading. I'll confess to everything. Tomorrow morning. Full statement. Adrian looked at Natasha. But tonight, I just need to make sure she's okay. Connor studied them both, then nodded. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Don't make me come find you. As the FBI cleared the scene, Caldwell paused beside Adrian. The real Isabella is safe. She's decided to let the ledger speak for itself. Your name is in it too, Mr. Dawson. Caldwell's expression was unreadable. But she asked me to tell you something. Her father would have appreciated that you finally chose truth over survival. Then she was gone, disappearing into the night like the ghost she'd always been. Adrian held Natasha as police lights strobed across the pier, both of them alive, both of them free. You're still going to prison, Natasha said softly. I know. And you're still going to lose everything. Not everything. He pulled back to look at her. Not the things that matter. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate and real. The first honest thing in his life of beautiful lies. 6 months later. Adrian Dawson stood in the federal courtroom in his off-the-rack suit. The expensive Italian wool was gone, sold to pay restitution, and listened to the judge deliver his sentence. 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years probation. Mr. Dawson, you've shown genuine remorse and cooperation with authorities. Your testimony helped convict Senator Sheffield, who faces significantly more time than you. That cooperation, and your willingness to make full restitution to those harmed by your actions, has been considered in this sentence. 18 months. It could have been 10 years. Adrian caught his mother's eye in the gallery. Elena Dawson looked older, worn by the scandal that had consumed her son. But she'd sat through every hearing, every deposition, every humiliating news cycle. When the media had camped outside her door, she'd told them simply, my son did wrong. He's facing consequences. That's what integrity looks like. It had become a viral clip, the retired teacher from Queens, showing more grace than her billionaire son ever had. Beside his mother sat Natasha, dark hair pulled back, taking notes in the reporter's notebook she always carried. She'd broken the story herself, the insider trading, the Russian connection, Senator Sheffield's conspiracy. Her exposé had won the Pulitzer Prize last month. They'd barely spoken during the trial. Ethics, she'd said. She was covering the story, he was the subject. Lines had to exist. But every day, she'd been there. In the courtroom. Watching. Waiting. Their eyes met now, and she gave the smallest nod. I'm still here. 4 months later. The federal prison camp in upstate New York wasn't the nightmare Adrian had imagined. Minimum security, mostly white-collar criminals like himself. He worked in the library, tutored other inmates for their GEDs, and had more time to think than he'd had in 20 years. Time to realize how much of his life had been performance. Time to grieve the man he'd been and imagine who he could become. His mother visited every 2 weeks, bringing books and news from the outside world. Dawson Capital had been dissolved, assets sold to pay the $47 million in restitution he owed. His penthouse, his cars, his art collection, all gone. He'd never felt lighter. There's someone else here to see you today, Elena said during her visit in month 4. Her eyes twinkled with something like mischief. I'll give you two some privacy. Natasha walked into the visiting room, and Adrian's heart did what it always did when he saw her, stopped, then started again, faster. Hi, she said. Hi. He gestured to the plastic chair across from him. This is a surprise. Story's over. Trial's done. Verdict's in. She sat, folded her hands on the table between them. I can talk to you now without compromising my ethics. And you want to? Talk to a convicted felon? I want to talk to Adrian Dawson, who chose truth over survival. Who testified against a senator even though it meant admitting his own crimes. Who's been teaching inmates to read instead of hiding in his cell. Natasha's expression softened. I want to talk to the man I always hoped you could be. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest. You waited. You asked me to. In Brighton Beach, you said you'd ask again after you did the right thing. She reached across the table, and he met her halfway, their fingers intertwining. So I'm here. Ask. Natasha Ripley, will you give me a chance? Not now, not while I'm in here. But when I get out, when I've paid what I owe, when I'm just some guy from Queens trying to rebuild his life, will you let me take you to dinner? Just dinner? To start. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Then maybe 1,000 more dinners. Maybe a lifetime of trying to be the man who deserves you. She smiled, and it was like sunrise after the longest night. Ask me again in 10 months when you get out. Is that a maybe? That's a prove you mean it. She squeezed his hand. But Adrian? I'm not going anywhere. 10 months later. Adrian walked out of federal prison on a crisp October morning with $347 in his prison account, the clothes he'd worn at sentencing, and a future that looked nothing like the one he'd planned. His mother waited by the gate, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him. Welcome home, Mijo. Thanks, Ma. He held her tight, this woman who'd taught him integrity and watched him forget it, then relearn it the hard way. And beside her, Natasha. Black leather jacket, dark eyes shining, that smile that had haunted him through endless nights in a prison cell. You came, he said. I told you I would. She stepped forward, and suddenly she was in his arms, and he was breathing her in, coffee and determination and home. How are you? Free. Terrified. Ready. He pulled back to look at her. Natasha Ripley, I'm out. I paid my debt, well, I'm still paying restitution, but the prison part's done. I have nothing but a job lined up at my old high school teaching financial literacy to kids who deserve better role models than who I was. Sounds perfect. I have no money, no empire, no penthouse. I'm living in my mother's spare room until I can afford a studio apartment in Queens. He took her hands. But I'm asking anyway, will you have dinner with me? Yes, Natasha said. But I'm paying. Investigative journalism actually pays pretty well when you win Pulitzers. He laughed, and it felt like flying. Deal. They had dinner that night at a small Italian place in Astoria, no Michelin stars, no celebrity chef, just good food and better conversation. Adrian told her about teaching plans, about the inmates he'd helped earn diplomas, about the book he was writing about corporate ethics and second chances. Natasha told him about her next investigation, about Isabella Dimitrov, the real one, who was now working with the FBI to reform financial intelligence protocols, turning her father's tragedy into meaningful change. She asked about you, Natasha said. Wanted to know if you were doing okay. What did you tell her? That you're becoming the person her father might have been proud to know. Someone who chose redemption over reputation. Natasha reached across the table. She forgave you, Adrian. Said her father would have too. Adrian felt tears prick his eyes. Forgiveness he'd never thought to ask for, never thought he deserved. And what about you? He asked quietly. Can you forgive the man I was? I'm in love with the man you're becoming. Natasha's voice was steady, sure. The rest is just backstory. 1 year later. Adrian stood in front of his financial literacy class at his old high school in Queens, watching 17-year-olds learn about compound interest and ethical investing. His classroom walls were covered with news clippings, not about his success, but his failure and redemption. Billionaire chooses prison over lies. Dawson testimony brings down corrupt senator. From Wall Street to cell block, one man's journey to integrity. Mr. D, question, Rosa Martinez raised her hand. Why'd you do it? Why confess when you could have gotten away with it? Adrian thought about a note on expensive cardstock. About a missing woman and a dead Russian and the weight of 16 years of lies. About Natasha's dark eyes and the choice between who he'd been and who he could become. Because getting away with it meant living in a prison I built myself, he said. Real prison had walls and guards, but I could serve my time and walk out free. The other kind? That's a life sentence. After class, he walked to the small apartment he now shared with Natasha in Park Slope, one bedroom, creaky floors, a view of a brick wall. It cost less than he used to spend on shoes. He'd never been happier. Natasha was at the kitchen table working on her laptop when he arrived, and she looked up with that smile that still made his heart stop. How was class? Good. Rosa asked why I confessed. He kissed the top of her head, looked over her shoulder at her screen. What are you working on? Something I've been writing for a while. Wasn't sure if I should show you. She turned the laptop. It's about second chances. About people who lose everything and find out what they're really worth. It was a book proposal. The Billionaire Who Chose Truth, a love story in the ruins of an empire. It's about us, Adrian said softly. It's about redemption. About how the things we think matter don't, and the things we think we can't live without are exactly what's holding us back. Natasha stood, faced him. What do you think? Adrian pulled her close, this woman who'd seen him at his worst and believed in his best. Who'd waded through trials and prison and the slow, painful work of becoming someone new. I think, he said, that I spent 16 years building an empire on lies. And I'd trade it all, every dollar, every success, every moment of false glory, for this. For you. For the truth. Good answer. She kissed him, deep and sure. Because I have one more question to add to the book. What's that? Natasha pulled a small box from her pocket, opened it to reveal a simple silver band. Adrian Dawson, we've done everything backward. Met as adversaries, fell in love during a scandal, built a relationship while you were in prison. So I figured, why not propose to you instead of waiting for you to ask me? Her eyes were bright. Marry me. Build a life with me. Not the fairy tale with the penthouse and the power, the real thing. The truth. Us. Adrian looked at this extraordinary woman, at the ring, at the future she was offering. A future with no guarantees except honesty. A future where he'd teach kids about integrity while paying restitution for the rest of his life. A future in a small apartment with creaky floors and a view of a brick wall. A future with Natasha. Yes, he said. God, yes. 1,000 times yes. When they kissed, Adrian Dawson, ex-billionaire, ex-convict, teacher, truth-teller, finally understood what wealth actually meant. It wasn't in a bank account. It was in choosing to be someone worth loving, and being loved anyway. It was freedom. Epilogue. 2 years after that. The small wedding took place in Elena Dawson's backyard in Queens, with 50 guests and catering from the neighborhood Italian place where Adrian and Natasha had their first real date. Isabella Dimitrov attended, now a consultant for financial reform, her father's ledger having sparked widespread changes in intelligence oversight. She hugged Adrian before the ceremony. He'd be proud, she whispered. Of who you became. Detective Connor came, along with half of Adrian's former inmates, men he'd helped earn their GEDs who now called him a friend. Even Catherine Caldwell sent a card, redemption suits you better than Armani ever did. See. As the sun set over Queens, Adrian and Natasha exchanged vows written in truth and earned through fire. I promise, Adrian said, to always choose honesty over comfort, integrity over image, and you over everything. I promise, Natasha said, to remind you who you are when you forget, to stand with you in storms, and to love you not despite your past, but because of how you faced it. They kissed as the sun painted the sky gold, and Adrian felt his mother's hand on his shoulder, her voice in his ear. I'm so proud of you, Mijo. Not for what you built, but for what you became when it all fell down. That night, lying beside his wife in their small apartment, Adrian thought about the blackmail note that had started it all. I know what you did in 2008. He'd spent 16 years running from that truth. And the moment he'd stopped running, the moment he'd turned to face it, that's when his real life had begun. So here's my question for you: what secret are you running from? What truth are you avoiding? Drop a comment below. Sometimes just saying it out loud is the first step to freedom. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about second chances and redemption, hit that subscribe button. Because we all have pasts. The question is, what are we going to do with our futures? Thanks for being here. Thanks for reading. And remember, it's never too late to choose truth over comfortable lies. See you in the next story.